This is my first official time using Vimeo, so can someone in the chat tell me if you can hear me? Yay! Oh, great. Great. So we'll be getting started in just a few minutes. Just a disclaimer, I woke up with a cold this morning, nothing serious, but if I randomly sneeze, I'm still learning how to do this. I may not mute it in time, so I apologize in advance. I got tissues ready. It's all good, but you know, you'll have to hear me sneeze. All right, so it is 8 o'clock, so we're going to get started now. Just to introduce myself, my name is Sarah Prinzi. I teach AP Psychology in a small town in Western New York. Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of weeks. Last week we had, I think it was 75 degrees on Wednesday. Today it snowed a couple inches. And next week we're supposed to have 75 degrees again on Wednesday. So that's how we do spring over here. Yeah, right. One other thing is I may have random pauses because, like I said, I've had my own CRAM sessions lately, learning all of this new awesome tech. So here we go. I'm going to start sharing my slides now. So I see Peter's in the chat. Peter, just do me a huge favor and shoot me a text if I do something wrong, okay? All right, hopefully these slides are coming up. So we are talking about tips and tricks for AP Psychology FRQs. And, oh, you know, 7 p.m. was when I was going to start getting myself ready. That should say 8 p.m., but y'all knew that. So I've been teaching AP Psychology. This is my 6th year. And so I've been working with these FRQs and the rubrics that come out from the College Board for quite a while. I've been, looking at a lot of the, the practice questions that they send for us. And I just realized I had to put my, there we go. So, yep, Peter just texted me about captions. Hopefully they're coming through. So yeah, first thing I want to say about FRQs is you've got this, okay? We will talk about how to write FRQs. We will talk about some great ways to organize your thoughts. One of my students actually the other day said FRQs were the easiest essays that she ever wrote. They were the only ones that made sense to her. So I've also gotten some input from the College Board. And we'll look real closely at how they recommend we write FRQs.
So just a heads up, this stream is being recorded. It might appear on the Fiveable website, YouTube, or other public channels. So if you ask a question, your Zoom name might appear on the screen. So please change your Zoom name if you would like to avoid that. Here are some of the handles for, or the social media platforms for Think Fiveable. There's the handle. And future CRAM sessions, these times are right, I checked. There's another FRQs Tips and Tricks on Thursday, the 29th at 6 p.m. And the CRAM finale is going to be Monday, the 10th of May at 5 p.m. That's going to be a 5-hour CRAM session. So what do we have for today? Today we have exam basics, FRQ tips and tricks, some practice time, and then some extra resources for review. So we'll start by talking about the AP exam itself, just to make sure we're all on the same page and you know what's coming. So in 2021, this year, the AP Psychology exam consists of 2 parts. You'll have approximately 100 multiple choice questions with historically about 70 minutes to complete. They have not actually posted the time yet, but they said that it's the way they've done it in the past. And we've had multiple choice. It's been 70 minutes. There's 2 FRQs, 6 to 8 bullet points per FRQ, and you will have 50 minutes to complete them. Again, historically, that's the amount of time allotted to complete them. By the way, while you're listening, if you get out a sheet of paper and a writing utensil, or just open up a random Word document, we're going to use that for practice in a little bit. So just give you a minute to get that ready while I keep talking. So 2020 was a little different. I just want to make sure we're all clear, because last year's AP exam, spring 2020, when everything shut down, it was very different than what this year's exam looks like. Last year, 2020's exam was only 2 FRQ questions. They completely got rid of the multiple choice. Also, last year's exam was open notes. This year, let me just be very clear, because the College Board is being very clear. The AP Psychology exam is not open notes this year. So just be warned. And this is really important to know because it shapes how we need to prepare for this exam. So, for example, last year I told students, get your notes organized, have lists of vocabulary ready, make sure when you look things up, you put things in your own words. This year it's, okay, you got to learn the vocabulary, right? So we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. The administration dates for this year's exam, Tuesday, May 11th at 12 p.m., whatever your local time is. And that's the paper and pencil version of the test. The second administration will be on Thursday, May 20th, and that'll be at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm here in Western New York. It'll be 4 p.m. here, but say you're out in California, it'll be 1 p.m. So beware of your time zone, because they want to give that exam synchronously. It's digital, and so they want everyone taking it at the same time, no matter where they are. Same thing for the third administration. That's June 3rd, a Thursday, also at 4 p.m. here, Eastern Standard Time. Again, check your time zone. So some advice to prepare for this exam. As I mentioned, know that vocabulary. You can't use your notes, right? Now, since the AP Psychology exam is not open notes, there's certain concepts that they are really going to be pushing you to apply. We'll talk about some of those foundational concepts in a minute. Make sure you study vocabulary. There's so much vocabulary in AP Psychology, you probably have noticed. There's some great online tools you can use. Quizlet, Gimkit, Kahoot are very helpful. You can just make old-fashioned flashcards. I mean, literally 3x5 cards, and you write the word, write the definition. As a couple of years ago, one of my students actually did that. And throughout the whole year, she just, every unit kept making a whole bunch of flashcards. She brought in a shoebox at the end of the year and showed it to me. She did very well. So some commonly used verbs, that's another thing you want to know about FRQs, is what the tasks will be specifically asking you to do. They may ask you to construct or draw. They may ask you to define. They may ask you to describe, draw a conclusion, explain, or identify and state. Application really is kind of, the core of what they're going for. They not only want to know that you know what these definitions are, but they want you to be able to apply them to scenarios. So keep in mind, you want to show that you know what these terms mean. So defining and describing is important, but really the application tends to be where you score your points. So next piece of advice is know Unit 1. Really know Unit 1. That's basically the scientific foundations of psychology. I mean, if you think about it, this is the basis of psychology as a science. It provides all of the foundational practices, research methods, statistics, parts of experiments, the psychological perspectives, and ethics. All of that is going to apply to every single other unit that we study. So making sure you've got this foundation really makes things clear when applying other units. Kind of similar with Unit 2. That is the biological basis of behavior. So think the brain and nervous system. Throughout you probably noticed in your study of AP psychology that we keep going back to the different parts of the brain and nervous system, right? And how these different parts of the brain affect behavior and the different roles that they play in behavior. So make sure you've also got this foundation of Unit 2 as well, especially the functions of the different parts of the brain. There's a great free study tool, and I got it through my phone. I got it in the App Store, Apple's App Store. It's called literally called 3D Brain, and the image looks like a colorful brain, like you see on this slide. Great study tool, because if you pull pull the app up, you can actually there's like a 3D image of a brain. Look at the bottom, look at the sides, and then it'll actually light up the different lobes and the different parts of the brain, tell you what they do. Really great review, very thorough. Now, once you're solid with Units 1 and 2, really, I would start there, then study the rest, right? Because it's gonna come up a lot. Excuse me. So again, thinking about research methods in the nervous system and how those play out, right? So, and I'll be demonstrating that in a few minutes, how these future units that you talk about after Units 1 and 2 play, Units 1 and 2 play a huge role in those units as well. Because again, it's really hard to apply concepts if you don't have the basics. So, speaking of biology, I'm going to do this too, because this is my first time doing this, my first go at teaching with Fiveable. So I'm a little bit nervous, I'll be honest. And I imagine you guys are a little bit nervous, right? It's AP season. I can imagine you're feeling the pressure. So let's stop and take a breath, for real. I know you might feel weird, but everyone's watching me do this. Did you take a breath? One more time. Take a deep breath. If it helps, look at the pretty clouds and the nice stack of rocks in the picture. Now take another breath. Now close your eyes last time. Take one more breath. I mean, I don't know about you, but I literally felt my blood pressure go down. Now, one thing I'd like you to do, think about one thing I've said so far that you remember. Anything that from those previous slides, what's one thing you remember me saying? You can type it in the chat if you like. I'll give you a minute. Good. Yep. Focus on 1 and 2. Good. The vocabulary. Yep. Much of the vocabulary as you can get. Good. Excellent. Good. Good. So there's a couple of reasons why we did this. One, actually going over something that and actually outputting the information that you just took in makes it more memorable. Good, good. I see more things coming in the chat. Great. There's another reason I asked you guys to take a breath, or 4. Sorry, I was looking at more things coming through the chat. It's because of the biology of breathing. I've read a lot of studies on this. In fact, at my school, they've been doing some professional development for teachers that has to do with brain science. And folks, your brain needs a minute. I threw a lot of information at you, right? That was a lot of talking. And maybe some of it you already knew, but maybe some of it you hadn't ever, heard before. Your hippocampus needs a minute to process the information you're hearing into long-term memory. So think about that, folks, when you're studying, okay? They talk about distributed practice. There's a man named Hermann Ebbinghaus, and he studied cramming. Now, I'm not saying don't come to cram finale, come to cram finale, right? But in the days leading up to cram finale, go to the other cram sessions and take some time every single day and keep going through the content, even if it's just for 30 minutes, and then you stop and take a 5 or 10 minute stretch break, and then you go back to it. Your hippocampus is always working. And when there's too much going, and you try to rush too fast, right? You only studied the night before instead of the distributed practice of studying over several days. You don't download the information into your long-term memory as well. The other thing is, the parasympathetic nervous system has a chance to take over when you breathe. If you were starting to feel a little stressed when I started, I saw in the chat, some of you guys were saying all the vocabulary, right? And I hear you, it is a lot of vocabulary. And just thinking about it, we can start getting tense. What starts to happen is your amygdala, especially if you get anxious and stressed, your amygdala fires up, right? That's our emotion center in our limbic system. And what starts to happen is our sympathetic nervous system takes over, our heart rate starts to go up, and we start to get into that fight or flight mode. And you know what shuts down? Right here, the frontal lobe. This prefrontal cortex, where we do so much of our deeper level thinking. And that's not what you want to have happen when you're studying or taking an exam. So when you're studying, even in the middle of taking your exam, it can actually make a biological difference in your body and in your brain if you slow down and take a couple deep breaths. If you're in a classroom full of people and they're looking at you kind of funny, close your eyes, take a deep breath. You might feel a little silly, but it really will help you lower your heart rate. And then that causes your fight or flight mode to slow down and the parasympathetic nervous system to take over. And this part of your brain that does your critical thinking, it allows that to take over. It really does make a difference. I've read legions of studies on this. The other thing is also leading up to the exam, really important to take time to take care of yourself. For several days, for weeks leading up to your exams, eat food with protein and fiber. They will help you feel full, and your brain needs that protein to keep functioning well. Same thing with drinking water. I know we start drinking a lot of coffee when we're trying to stay up late, right? Or maybe Mountain Dew or I don't know what the latest caffeinated beverage is, but water, okay? And if you can't stay awake, go to sleep. Get some sleep. You need sleep. There's more and more studies coming out about how much we need sleep. And that may mean that if you have a phone, consider turning it off. And even if you have to charge it in another room, if you have to separate yourself from your devices, do it. It's worth it. Also, tell a trusted friend or family member about it. Whatever it is, whatever you got going on. Tell a trusted friend or family member, because sometimes when we got stuff nagging us at the back of our minds, it can interrupt our focus, right? Especially in this day and age when we've got all kinds of things to pull at our attention. It just seems like the world is stressed out, right? Try as best you can. Talk to somebody when you need to, and try to set things aside so that you can focus. Again, turn off the phone if you need to. Also, take breaks. Do something fun. I know we call this AP season, it's cram season, right? We got so much going on. It really is important to take a break and do something fun. Yes, get back to the studying, of course, but you deserve to take a break. And exercise. Exercise, again, does so much. You want those endorphins, right? You want the dopamine pumping through your brain and helping you think and helping you process. It really does make a difference when you exercise. And if whatever works for you. I mean, if you like to, lift weights, you like to go for a walk, whatever is really good and healthy for you. And when you feel the pressure start to build, take 10 seconds and breathe. Taking care of yourself really does help with memory retention and recall, which is kind of our goal. And remember, you've got this. It is just a test. In the end, it'll be over, whatever, maybe it's May 11th, maybe it's May 20th, maybe it's June 3rd. It will be over, right? And then you can roll on, and in the end, I don't know. I had a bad experience with an AP exam in high school. I did not do well in my AP US history exam. To be honest, I went and majored in history in college, and I still ended up in the History Honor Society. So I worked hard. I still did well. Okay. So even if your exam doesn't go well, you'll be okay. You got this. And if it goes well, great, college credit. Okay. So now I've given you life advice. I'm sorry. I'm a psych teacher. I love Lucy. I can't help it. So now let's talk FRQs. So each bullet point, here's how they're scored. Each bullet point in the prompt or task is worth 1 point. For example, let's say there's a 7-bullet question, and let's say you get 5 of them answered correctly, you would get a 5 out of 7 for that question. The 2 FRQs together are worth 1/3 or 33.3% of your exam score. The first FRQ, and this is from the exam guide, is concept application. Really, that means anything is fair game. They'll give you a scenario. I'll show you an example in just a minute. And the second FRQ is research design. Remember unit 1. Not that they won't ask you about the concepts in the other units, but again, right, got to have that foundation to understand what they're getting at. Again, 6 to 8 bullet points per FRQ. So there's some things you're required to do. Okay, and I'll go through those. And then there's some things that AP readers like you to do. So remember, these are humans grading your essays. So I'm going to give you a couple bits of advice, things that'll put them in a good mood. By the way, don't forget, if you're doing the first administration, bring a pencil for the multiple choice and bring a pen or 3. If you're taking the test on paper, they do want the FRQ in black or blue ink. Okay. Make sure you also write neatly. AP readers do not do benefit of the doubt points if they can't read your handwriting. So do make sure you write neatly. If you're taking the test digitally, I put in a link here for you to download the exam app that was made available, I think, last week. So make sure you get that on the device you're going to take your exam on. A note on question security. College Board does not want practice questions reproduced or posted online in any way. They're particularly tense about their multiple choice questions. They also, after you take your exam, don't discuss any of the questions. Okay, like there's some question out there, like, are they more strict about FRQ questions or multiple choice? Here's my advice: don't talk about any of them. Okay, because you just don't know. And sometimes the College Board might change their mind. So I once you take your test, it's done, right? Just move on with your life and don't talk about it online, on paper, in person, any of that. And they even say in the proctoring directions, don't discuss the questions with your teacher either or other students. They really are just don't talk about it. So I wrote a sample question so that no one's going to get in any trouble here. So here's the sample question, and we're actually going to practice this in a couple of minutes when we get to that part. So I'll just read it to you real quick. It says, for years, students have shown their courage and grit by signing up for AP Psychology and taking the AP exam in May or June. Explain what role each of the following might play in a student's decision to sign up for AP Psychology, their efforts to complete their coursework throughout the year, and or the experience of taking the exam. Now notice, I've got some concepts here. This is a potential concept application question. Notice these concepts are from all different units. They love those kinds of questions. They almost never will give you a concept application question that is only 1 unit's worth of content. They like to kind of spread it out and pull from different units. So like right here, approach avoidance, this is from stress and health. Operant conditioning, that's from the learning unit. Sympathetic nervous system and the hippocampus, those are from the biology or the biological systems. Internal locus of control and extrinsic motivation from motivation. So now, these are the things you kind of have to have. Well, you don't have to have an intro or conclusion. To be honest, in listening to AP readers talk, I have not been an AP reader for the College Board yet. I'm hoping soon. But I've listened to a lot of them share their thoughts when they're grading these things. And They didn't say don't write an intro or conclusion, but you only got 50 minutes, right? So you kind of want to spend that time on really focusing on your thoughts and fully applying the concepts. So if you need to write an intro and conclusion, more power to you, especially if it helps organize your thoughts, but you really don't have to. You may want to save your time focusing on just think of them as body paragraphs for your essay. Another piece of advice is I would definitely use separate paragraphs, not a required piece of advice, but I would. Because remember I told you want to put these people in a good mood who are grading your essay, and having a well-organized FRQ definitely will put them in a good mood. I also advise that you use a separate paragraph for each bullet point. That is, they are looking to see per bullet point. Did you get that point? Did you get that point? And then I'd also skip a line or two between paragraphs, really make it just visually obvious you're moving on to a new topic. They want this to be easy, and they want to be very clear that you have answered the question. You don't have to answer the bullet points in order, but I advise that you do. Anything to put them in a good mood. Clarity and organization makes them happy. Make sure you're also clear about what psychological concepts and terms the bullet point's asking about. So again, just make sure you know. I would actually start with a definition or a description of whichever term you're starting with. Again, preferably in order, but doesn't have to be, because you really want to prove you know what you're talking about. Make sure, I tell my students this all the time, make sure you're writing your complete thoughts on the paper or on the screen, however you're taking your test, because I tell my students this, they're not grading what's in your head, right? They can only score what you have physically written, right? So there's no like, oh, I know what they're getting at, right? You have to make sure you fully get your thoughts out on the paper. Another reason I personally wouldn't bother with an intro or conclusion. It saves me time in my explanation and definitions. Now, I underline this one because this is typically where you score your points. Think of it as the core of your FRQ, right? You must correctly connect or apply the concept to the task. So once you got your definition, now you got to apply it to the scenario. It's so easy to focus so hard on remembering on, okay, did I get the definition right? And then forget to apply it to the prompt, right? You got to make sure you apply it to the actual task that they're asking you to apply to. Interestingly, they put this in the rubric. You might not miss a point if you contradict yourself. So let's say you write your definition and you didn't word it exactly right, but then you applied the concept and you did it perfectly. A lot of times you can still get the point as long as you've thoroughly applied it to the scenario and it's correct. There's a possibility you could still get the point for that bullet. But again, ideally you want it all to be correct. Careful with your word choice. Remember, AP readers are assessing whether or not you know the concept. So be careful about echoing the question. You want, you want to make sure you use synonyms when you can, because when you do that, you show you know what you're talking about. Next, you want to make sure you use your own ideas. This is so important. If you have a photographic memory, I actually know some people who do. And if people who can literally close their eyes and read things that were in a dictionary, right? If you have a photographic memory or you've got flashcards and you memorize word for word a definition out of a textbook, that's awesome. Still reword it. Put it in your own words. AP readers and the College Board have access to all manner of anti-plagiarism materials, particularly because just the way information technology is right now, with the exams being digital, many of them, you don't want any risk of plagiarism. Okay, so make sure your responses, your definitions are written in your own words, and also make sure your applications are your ideas. Okay. All right, so we're gonna do a little bit of practice now. I don't know, like I said, CRAM session for technology for me. So I don't know how to put a little clock on the slide, but I do have a cell phone. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give us approximately 12 minutes. I'll set my little timer. Remember that little piece of paper or that document you opened up? I'd like you to go through each one of these bullets. I'll give you 2 minutes for each one. Go ahead and kind of plan out. 12 minutes, you don't have time to actually write the whole FRQ, right? But plan out how you would answer this. So again, there's 6 bullet points. I'll give you 12 minutes. starting now. And remember, application is key. One more thing. You can't use your notes on the test. But if you want to use your notes right now, it's okay. I want you to have the chance practicing applying these. And if you don't remember what they are, you're not going to be able to do that, right? So go ahead, just for this practice session, go ahead and look them up if you need to. Plan out how you would apply these concepts to the task. Got my timer going.
All right, about 5 minutes left.
Got about a minute left. So organize your final thoughts. We'll see how we did. All right. So I wrote a couple, per bullet, I wrote possible answers, ways you can apply each of these parts of the task. And again, you don't have to apply it exactly how I did, right? But also, check your definitions and kind of see if, excuse me, if you think the way you applied it would work. So, and always remember, so see how I kind of wrote it in a paragraph, right? They do want full sentences. I saw some of the questions in the chat, great questions. They do want your answer in full sentences. They do want them in paragraphs, but I would just say for each bullet, make a paragraph. And it's okay if you only have like 2 or 3 sentences in your paragraph. I know we might be used to writing really long essays. These don't necessarily have to be long. So what's important is that you're thorough and that you applied the concept correctly. So approach avoidance conflict, how might that apply to an AP psychology student? So I'll just read off the slide. It says approach avoidance conflict is experienced when an individual must weigh the costs and benefits of making a particular decision. So when I was actually prepping this, I actually Googled and I also looked at approach avoidance conflict, and then I also looked at my textbook that I use in my class, and then I actually practiced rewording it and putting it in my own words to give you. So I give you guys an example and make sure it didn't line up with what I might actually have in the back of my mind from 6 years of teaching out of the same book. So again, the definitions that you've been learning, it's great if you've got to memorize, make sure you reword it, okay? I also put the application in bold here. You don't have to do that. In fact, I recommend you don't. Use just regular font when you type. The only reason I did that is so it would be very visibly obvious where my application is in my sample, okay? So my application with approach avoidance conflict is a student who is considering signing up to take AP psychology may have to decide if the cost of time and effort that will be required to complete the coursework is worth the benefit of having this challenging course on their transcript when they apply to college, right? So you can see there's, the benefit of having this challenging course, but there's the cost, right? That is the extra work and time that it's going to take and, possibly stress. So that is one possible way you could apply approach avoidance. Obviously, there's many ways you can do that. So the next bullet point was operant conditioning. Remember, definition application. So again, I'll say again, don't actually use bold in your FRQ, just use regular font, okay? Operant conditioning, definition here, is the process of learning through the experience of punishment and or reinforcement. So how can we apply that to the prompt? A student in an AP psychology course may learn to practice good study habits and self-care. Every time another unit test is announced, the student makes time to study at regular intervals while taking short breaks. They have been reinforced with high grades on their unit tests, right? So notice I actually put in there what they learned, right? They learned good habits and self-care. Good time to talk about that, right? And I also identified how they were reinforced. And I used the word reinforced. Now, if you wanted to apply this using punishment in some way, you could, as long as you correctly applied the concept. This is just one way you could do it. The sympathetic nervous system was the next bullet. So definition application. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the body's fight or flight response. When the body is facing a stressful situation, the sympathetic nervous system activates the associated hormones, neurotransmitters, and organs in order to deal with the stress. So in the days leading up to the AP Psychology exam, many students experience stress. Some students have trouble sleeping and may experience issues with digestion. When taking their test, some students may experience increased heart rate and breathing, as well as sweating and dilated pupils, right? So I mentioned, and notice this one's a little longer, right? So something that is something like the sympathetic nervous system, where there's, a lot of different, I guess, symptoms or different aspects of how the sympathetic nervous system activates. Notice I didn't just give one way that the student would be physically impacted by their sympathetic nervous system impacted or activating. I mentioned a bunch, right? So when you're really thorough like that, they kind of love it. Extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is when behavior is driven by an external motivation. Students might sign up to take AP Psychology for an extrinsic motive, typo there. For extrinsic motivations, including the praise and approval of their parents, or to make their high school transcript more impressive to colleges when they are applying for admission. So I want you to notice something here. My definition is pretty weak, okay? But my application is strong. Notice, because did you notice I didn't use enough of a synonym, and I didn't so much explain what an external motivation is, right? I didn't explain that is a motivator that is from something that is outside of the individual, right? If you really want to impress them, get the full definition in there. However, this most likely would still score because the application is solid. Right? I demonstrated that I knew what extrinsic motivation was because I gave actual examples of how that might look in the scenario. Okay. So, and again, I show you this not because I want to tell you to be lazy with your definition. If you got it, use it, right? If you've got the information. However, please notice that it's the application that scores. So next is internal locus of control. This is when an individual feels they have the ability to control the outcome of their lives through their own actions. So a student in AP Psychology who has an internal locus of control will believe they have ability to do well in their AP exam if they study well and take care of themselves in the days and weeks leading up to the exam. Okay, so yeah, pretty straightforward. Last one here, the hippocampus is the seahorse-shaped part of the brain in the limbic system that is responsible for the formation of long-term memories. So, identified, it's in the limbic system. They like that. And again, especially the function of this part of the brain, forming long-term memories. And then application. When a student is studying for their AP Psychology exam in the days leading up to the big day, their hippocampus will be actively processing the information they are learning about psychological concepts and storing it for recall during the exam. Now, notice I also slid in there, some other vocab terms, recall, right? Storage or storing, the whole information processing model of memory, right? When you can do that, they really love it. So, one more practice question. This one is a research methods question. And I do want to make sure we have time to talk about it. So I know it said 12 minutes, but if it's okay with you, I'm just going to do 10 minutes for you guys to get your thoughts written down on your little piece of paper or your separate document. Again, you can look up the different bullet points if you want. So the question says, a researcher wants to study whether or not a new medication will help with positive symptoms of schizophrenic patients. Explain how each of the following could play a role in the researcher's study. So it's random assignment, independent variable, experiment or bias, dopamine, placebo, and informed consent. So let's focus on the application, okay? How would each of those play a role in this particular study? Again, I'll give us, maybe if it's okay. Yeah, I'll give us 10 minutes. Let's say 4 minutes left. I want to make sure we can go over these. Good questions in the chat, by the way. All right, one more minute. Wrap up those final thoughts. All right, let's see how we did. So random assignment, that is when researchers place participants into experimental and control groups in the study, keeping in mind the varying demographics of the participants. I kind of went a little fancy. I use the word demographics. You don't necessarily have to use that word. This is important because it helps to control for any confounding variables. So this is one where it could be really easy to forget to apply it to the scenario, right? Especially if you say a lot in your definition. So in this study, researchers could or would randomly assign participants into the control and experimental groups, checking to see that there's a balance between males, females, participants, age ranges, etc. So it's a little longer possible response. Independent variable. That is the variable in an experiment that is controlled by the researcher. In this study, the independent variable could be which pill is given to the participants. The researcher could give the control group a placebo pill and the experimental group the antipsychotic medication that is being studied. And notice, I also happen to put in there antipsychotic medication, showing that I know that is potentially the medication that would be used in this study with schizophrenic patients. Next, experimenter bias is when the researcher unintentionally affects the results of their experiment. Now, my definition's pretty thin, right? But remember, you score your points on the application. So in the case of this medication study, a researcher may unconsciously make a facial expression that serves as a cue to participants that their pill is the real medication and not the placebo. This might impact how the participants perceive the effectiveness of the medication and skew the researcher's findings. Okay, so again, notice I really put my oomph in the application, specifically explaining how it could kind of fall apart in the study with experimenter bias. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is involved in planning, mood, and feelings of pleasure. In this scenario, the positive symptoms of the schizophrenic patients participating in this study are likely caused by an excess of dopamine. The medication that is being studied could be an antipsychotic medication that blocks dopamine receptors. Just so you know, that second sentence, you may not even be necessary. If you know that dopamine is a cause of positive symptoms of schizophrenic patients, that could be enough. But again, it doesn't hurt, right? It doesn't hurt to apply it to the antipsychotic medication. A placebo is a pill that is given to a control group to evaluate the effectiveness of a medication. In this study, the placebo pill could be given to the control group and the actual medication could be given to the experimental group. The two groups can then be evaluated and or surveyed regarding any changes in their schizophrenic symptoms, and the results can be compared, right? So And in fact, I had mentioned the placebo pill earlier. So when you do that, you got to watch out to make sure you still talk about the placebo pill itself and fully apply that concept. Informed consent. Now we're also talking about ethics. Ethics will probably be in the research methods question. Informed consent is permission given by participants or a legal guardian if the participant is a minor to participate in the study. Participants must be made fully aware of any potential risks that might result from their participation in the study and demonstrate their willingness to take those risks. In this scenario, the researcher must receive the informed consent of all participants after informing them of the potential risks and side effects of taking the antipsychotic medication that is being studied. Now, again, remember, when you think about how you did, right? You don't have to answer it the exact same way. You don't have to apply it the same way I would. You probably notice there's a lot of ways you could. But if you wouldn't mind real quick, I know we're just hitting at my time, it's 9 o'clock. In the chat, would you mind just throwing in there real quick? Yes, no. Were you able to apply at least some of the concepts in these FRQs? Did you have some success tonight? So that'd be yes or no. And then one other question. On a scale of 1 to 5, this helps me with feedback. How helpful was this demonstration? 1 not being helpful at all, 5 being helpful. And I do appreciate your feedback. I'm not going to get offended. I'm human, giving it my best. And, I hope to do this again sometime. So I am hoping to, keep working on continuing to tweak and make things work a little bit better. Keep an eye on my time next time better. So the College Board, by the way, also has some live streamed review sessions Monday through Thursday, April 19th to 29th. So the AP YouTube channel is a place you may want to be tuning in. Also, there's AP classroom videos through AP Daily via the College Board. There's some other AP psychology instructors with some extra lessons that are really, really helpful. Also, for more practice FRQ questions, AP Psychology textbooks a lot of times have them. I also highly recommend Crash Course in Psychology videos. You can go to YouTube and search Crash Course in Psychology. Hank Green talks fast, like faster than I do. But he's got some great visuals, and sometimes I think he's funny. So Kahoot, Gimkit, and Quizlet. Also, again, don't forget that vocabulary. And remember, you got this. It'll be over soon. I may or may not have just learned how to put GIFs into Google Slides. Last but not least, think Fiveable. Here are the social media platforms they have. And go ahead and keep the conversation going in Discord. And I think that's it. I'm going to real quick go through the chat. Well, thank you guys for the feedback. Oh, informed consent would be for a study. All right, I think I end the event now. So again, I'm still learning this. So yeah, I'm gonna head over to Discord too. I'm gonna try at least. It's my first time using it. So thank you everybody for joining me. Think Fiveable, and have a great rest of your evening.